Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. And I'm here today with Martin Tracy, who is a musician turned writer and filmmaker. And he's written a bunch of books, including Beneath the Floodlights, Things They'll Never See, and the Judd Stone series. But before we get into our conversation about the folklore behind his work, I want to tell you how I've been folkloring lately. And so, a couple of things I've done is one, I went to a ritual with my friends for the full moon, and that was a lot of fun. It always is. And the other thing that I've been doing, I haven't had a ton of time because I've been trying to build out a website, but I did have a chance to make my own sugar scrubs. And so that was a lot of fun. I had intended to do it before Christmas and give them as gifts, but obviously that did not work out for me. So, anyway, Martin, welcome.
Uh, Thank you very much for having me, Tracy. Happy to be here.
Sure, sure. So, have you been folkloring lately? And if so, how?
Yeah, I've been doing a little bit. Been reading quite a bit of stuff, folklore, especially as I know I was coming on this, so I had to familiarize myself with some of the folklore themes in my books, like the Club 27 um thing that has happened where 27, all these pop stars are age 27, but also I've been fascinated lately, and I hope this counts as folkloring, by all the planets that are aligned, aren't they? I think there's just Mercury to just get into, and I'm always kind of curious as to what that can do to people. Because if the astrology and the lining of the planets can actually affect people in some ways.
Yeah,
There
I've
you go.
I've heard about that it's happening. I'm not a big like I don't have a huge interest in
Mm.
astrology, and I used to study astronomy because my dad was really interested in it, but I haven't for most of my adult life now. But yeah, I mean, the stories they tell about the moon and how
Mm.
crazy people get. So it would be
Yeah,
very
bark at the moon. Yep.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And as we're recording this, we have new moon today.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah. So time for new beginnings, time for
Mm.
drawing stuff into your life as using the symbolism of the moon getting bigger. So a little extra bonus folkloring there.
Yeah.
Okay, so can you tell us about yourself and kind of the path that you took to get to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I'm from Birmingham, UK. People may or may not recognise my accent, but it is a distinctive one in the UK. So there are probably only other people who from there at UB40, you'd probably recognise them. Also, I mean, Ozzy Osbourne, you're going to know him. So he's not from too far away. And then Peaky Blinders has helped put Birmingham on the map. So that's enough about me and my accent, I think, and where I'm from. But my path to where I am today, really, I first knew I was okay at writing because I wrote a couple of stories at school. Very young as a schoolboy, and it won back-to-back competitions for my school. So I knew I could write stories. One was about a magic ice cream van that helped kids cross the road. It was like it had to be about a road safety campaign. So that was that one. But then music, I guess, I was always my first love, and I grew up listening to Elvis. I discovered the Beatles on my own. My dad had an Elvis record collection, and we were donated a piano. When again around the same time as a around 6, 7 year old boy. And I took piano lessons. So I was able to listen to music and play it, which was just kind of a dream come true almost really. And then I went to play in bands. My writing then manifested through writing songs. Um, but then there came to a point after doing the gigging, carrying your keyboard around, yeah, because it's not like like a singer just carries a mic around. A keyboard's quite, it could be worse. I could be a drummer. But it got to the point where I just thought, I want to kind of move away, not totally move away from the music, but it was just too much. The time was right to like close my keyboard case, so to speak, and think about doing something else creatively because I can only do things on a creative path. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of what makes me tick. So I decided, well, everyone's got one book in them. I write Beneath the Floodlights, and that was the first book I wrote. But as it happened, I got the bug and just carried on writing. So that's where I am today as an author. And the filmmaker was very, very recently with another author called D.G. Torrance. So we might have time to talk about that later, but we might not. But basically, we've done a film about going back to Birmingham where I started this conversation about the talent of Birmingham, like Ozzy Osbourne, Bev Bevan, who was drummer in Black Sabbath, ELO, The Move, musical, different people.
Mhm.
So that the film, as I say, is a very new thing though. I've been an author now for well over a decade, so yeah, that's where I am.
And you have done a lot of nonfiction books about
Yeah,
various people.
yeah.
Um, but that's not the books that we want to talk about today. We want to talk about your fictions.
Probably not, no. I mean, there's no, no. There's some cross. There is some sort of folklore things tenuously linked in there, like John Lennon and his belief of numerology. Because I've done a discography on John Lennon as an example. But yeah, it's mainly my fiction books or faction books, because I do weave fact with fiction. So, but that's probably the ones we want to talk about today, Tracy. Yeah.
Yeah, let's get into it. I mentioned Beneath the Floodlights and Things They'll Never See. Why don't you
Yeah.
tell us about those?
Yeah, so they're my two standalone novels, if you like. Both in the horror genre, I guess, or is there such a thing as a scary genre? Dark fiction is something that's used a lot as a tagline for me. I mean, my Judge Stone series in particular, that cuts through lots of different genres. But it's safe to say that the two that we're going to talk about primarily Beneath the Floodlights, Things I Never See are more sort of standalone in their genres. And that is because Beneath the Floodlights is about vampires that take over a soccer team. So that was a bit of a strange one. And Things They'll Never See is about a rock star who buys a haunted house and he needs help to help his so he was in a very successful band in the 80s. So it's set in the 90s. Grunge has come along, with the likes of Kurt Cobain, Nirvana, that kind of thing. In Britain, of course, there's the revival of Britpop, like Oasis and all that. And it is kind of finding it hard to fit into that musical genre after being a very successful member of a band in the 80s. So he needs a bit of, and he's gone solo, so he needs a bit of help for his solo career to kick off. And does he or doesn't he get help from the Beyond the Grave when he moves to the Peak District in England and buys a haunted house? Yeah.
So, what kind of haunting is it?
It is ghosts, not a poltergeist, nothing like that. It's proper old-fashioned spiritual ghosts. He does see an apparition. Um, things go bump in the night, literally. But it's that old, that full sort of archetypal haunted house with the creaking beams. When he first goes in, it hasn't been lived in for years. It's from like centuries old in England. It's built from timber. There happens to be a piano left in it. So although it hasn't been habit lived in for a few years, it's got all them trademarks. Lead windows, but very old house, spooky house. Take a lot of heating, especially in England, in the Peak District. Yeah. But
So,
the hauntings are primarily ghosts. Yeah, I mean, there's things that happen and that they're left, like clues are left in the house and things like that. And there's no kind of logical explanation how them clues have been left. So there's that kind of thing. Yeah.
so is the main character, the rock star, is it frightening for him, or is he like, "Hey, there's ghosts here. That's cool."
Yeah, it is a bit frightening for him at first, but the reason he's ended up in the Peak District, he's got a little bit disillusioned with the rat race in the Big Smoke down in London. So he's originally from Derbyshire, which is basically the Midlands of England. And, careers, especially at that time, you had to move to London to kind of do anything. It's sort of the catalyst of all things creation. That's where your TV shows, your radio shows, your magazines, you know. So he's had to be in London a long time, but he's got a little bit disillusioned with it and with the press and the media. So there's a bit of a look at that and the way the media treats people and that kind of thing. Especially in that age of the 80s, 90s. I think he actually, although he's a bit spooked out at first, I think he kind of prefers the ghosts, hauntings than the real people, to be honest. But there's a love interest, and she gets quite freaked out by the ghosts that are happening once she starts to move in, because she tracks him down. Originally as one of these journalists who are a bit
Uh,
nasty and horrible. But I don't want to give too much away. But it kind of the relationship thaws, it mellows, and she becomes quite a good confidant for him. However, she's a bit freaked out by the all the ghosts and the hauntings. Yeah.
sure, sure. Okay, well, let's talk about vampire soccer players.
Yeah, yeah, this is how I'm wired, folks. I get these crazy ideas. Originally, it was going to be werewolves taking over a football team because my football team, soccer team, so football in England is soccer to you guys. I know you've got another football thing going, but if I say football, I mean soccer. So
You
sorry if I
you
slip
better be
into it.
careful though, about half my listeners are in the UK, so
Oh, okay, that's cool. Well, everyone knows football then in the UK. Hello, UK people. Um, so. My team is Wolverhampton Wanderers. Our nickname is Wolves. Okay. So I had an idea of werewolves taking over football team, but then I thought it was too restrictive. Going back to what we were saying about the moon and everything,
mm,
really it's supposed to be a full moon where a werewolf comes out. So I thought the plot was going to be too restrictive. So I was already inspired anyway by the films from Dusk Till Dawn and The Lost Boys.
mhm,
Um, and I love vampires as a thing. So I thought, well, there's probably more mileage if they're vampires, um, and that when a lot of the games are played under the floodlights, that's when it's dark. So notoriously, vampires, as we know, they either sleep for the day or hang upside down as bats, and then they come out at night where they've got the superhuman strengths or super creature strengths,
mhm.
supernatural strengths, I should say, I guess. So my vampires have evolved a bit over the generations to be able to live in the light without burning and setting on fire.
Right, right.
However, they are more powerful at night. So when these games are played under the floodlights at night time, in the dark, they're just fantastic footballers. And so a guy called Professor Cesar Prodonescu becomes the manager of the football team,
Okay.
and he brings over this nest of vampires, which also double up as a school of football excellence. They're all these kids who have he's took them from the sewers of Brazil and the streets of Brazil, or remain in orphanages and things like that. Because he's from Transylvania, like Dracula was. So I've kept some of the traditions of vampire folklore as we know
Sure.
it, and
Sure.
the stories behind it, but just evolve them a little bit. But he's there primarily because he knows that the world's first vampire is buried nearby. There's a park near here called Sutton Park, which people wouldn't believe is in urban Birmingham because it's about 5 miles square. It's brilliant. King Henry VIII used to use it for hunting and that, and it's still very unspoilt now. When you're in there, you can't realise you're in like a city as such. Um, where was I? Yeah. So yeah. Oh yeah. So that vampire, that very world's first vampire, he knows he's buried in the park somewhere. So he wants to get it, and he wants to clone the bones of the DNA because he's a professor of football or soccer, but he's also a professor of genealogy, and he wants to recreate that vampire race starting from the master. Um, Does he or doesn't he? I'm not going to go there either. I'm not going to.
I think it's interesting of, like the idea of updating the vampire lore because I think
Mm,
that, particularly in cities,
yeah,
it's light all the time, really.
yeah,
And so we're not as scared of the dark as we used to be.
yeah. That's true.
It's,
Yeah,
yeah, and there are still places that are, quite dark at night, but most people have electricity, and
yeah.
so, we can turn on the lights and keep the day going for ourselves.
Exactly, exactly.
And the dark isn't as scary as it once was for us
Yeah,
because of our
yeah,
life.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, and part of the reason as well, I thought logically, I mean, obviously it helps the story if they can move around in the day, because footballers not turning up for training that isn't very good. But like the snow leopard, I believe, I've done some research to find out how things evolve. So the snow leopard evolved. It was when it started to live in snow. That's why it's got these certain paws because it can walk on snow. So everything evolves to its environment, doesn't it? And if vampires started all them centuries ago, then they would evolve and adjust to not necessarily be able to not look at light and that kind of thing. So it made sense for me to do that. But I did want to keep some of the traditions like holy water kills them, stake through the heart kills them, or holy water certainly damages them if you throw it at them and that kind of stuff. So I do like some of the original traditions, but I just wanted to tweak it a bit really,
sure.
it was when I voted, I guess there was quite a big movement on sparkly vampires, and
Yeah.
kind of I wanted to go back to like my vampires smell blood and they want blood. I wanted that kind of real vampire, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not knocking the other stuff, everything's got its place, but for me, I just like my vampires to be blood-sucking vampires. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting though. It's making me sort of realize how we do always like when we create monsters, they
Mm.
always have that some sort of fatal flaw.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's to make us feel like there's always going to be potential, anyway, for positive outcome if you encounter
Yeah.
a creature.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I think you're onto something there because obviously you're flipping it, but your superheroes have got kryptonite, Superman.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
um, but yeah, there's that same thing. No, if you make something indestructible, it's very boring. There's nowhere for that to go, or there's no threat or risk around that
right, yeah,
creature, person, whatever it is.
right.
So you kind of need to give them, you need to place some sort of risk around them or some vulnerability to make the story more interesting. And I think that's right. That there's hope, isn't there? You're coming across vampires, but there is hope if we can just get a stake through the heart.
Right,
We're all
right.
right. Easier said than done, but yeah.
Okay, why don't we shift over to the Judd Stone series? Because your main
Okay.
character, Judd, encounters a lot of weird supernatural stuff, right?
It does, yeah. Judd was originally a sidekick and it was meant to. This is the strangest story. I say strangest story. It's not that strange, but it might interest you and your listeners. So I was going to do this standalone book called Mind Gorilla, and it's a bit of a tome, I grew up reading Stephen King and The Stand and all that, and these big books, and I thought I want to do one of them. And also, I'd been inspired by Peter James and Martina Cole to do a crime novel. But I knew I wanted to keep supernatural elements within there. So Mind Gorilla, the original protagonist is a guy called Detective Chief Inspector William Chamberlain, who works in the police. And what he's actually suffers with multiple sclerosis.
Oh,
But as his multiple sclerosis gets worse, his power of telekinesis gets stronger.
ah,
And Judd was always meant to just be a sidekick to him, like, a foil, every cop show you watch, they've got a number two, a partner, haven't they?
right.
So that's all Judd was meant to be. But I did make him very interesting. He's an ex-soccer hooligan turned cop. He grew up on the streets. William Chamberlain was like his mentor. And what happens in the story is there's a telekinesis thing going on where he can start to move matter with his mind.
Oh,
William can. Um, but as his powers of telekinesis evolve, he's understanding that he can actually start to control minds and that kind of thing. And it looks at all the MK Ultra conspiracy theories. It looks at all the programmed assassins or alleged programmed assassins. And Judd has to solve a crime, but it could potentially have been put. The crime may potentially be happening because of the mind control of his mentor. However, he's got good reason. So there's a bit of a conundrum for Judd because A, William's his mate and his mentor. B, he's set a path in motion using his mind for the common good.
hmm, okay.
But if he's going to do things right as a policeman, he should really foil what's happening. So there's quite a lot going on. There's religious cults in there. There's serial killers in there. So that basically became the first Judge Stone book without me knowing, because then in some of the reviews, people were saying, "I want to read more Judge Stone. I want to," because he's a bit of an anti-hero. He doesn't play by the rules. So the second book was Club 27. I'd always been fascinated by the 27 Club, just this phenomena of pop stars and artists dying at the age of 27 tragically. It gives me no pleasure, but it's just always fascinated me. And people say, "Oh, yeah, but the lifestyle they lead, the bound to die at 27." Yeah, but hold on. Why not 26, 28, 29? Why 27? That's quite precise.
What are some of the people in the club?
So people in the club are Jim Morrison from
Okay.
The Doors,
Yeah, yeah.
Amy Winehouse, most recently, I guess,
Yeah.
Kurt Cobain. That's really when it started. People started to rethink about it again because it was quite big in the 60s, well, 60s to 70s, because in the space of 3 years, 3rd of July 1969, Brian Jones died from the Rolling Stones at age 27. 3rd of July 1971, so you're literally just like, 2 years later, on the same day, to the very day, Jim Morrison died.
Hmm.
And in between that, you had Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix die. So, a bit of a strange thing going on that these pop stars are dying at the age of 27. I mean, Brian Jones was a drowning, allegedly. There's another conspiracy theory. But, drugs and lifestyles are inevitably play a part. But if you peel away the layers, there could be so many other reasons as to why it could be. But sort of to answer your question and just to talk about the series a bit, and we can come back to it if we want, the 27 Club. So always fascinated by it. So I thought, well, I've always wanted to write a bit of a novel around it. How do I do it? So I gave Judd the task of trying to work out and solve why the 27 Club happens.
Okay.
And also at the same time, he's left the police station because he's an anti-hero. He can't play by the police's rules anymore. And he
Okay.
becomes a bodyguard to a 26-year-old pop star
Oh.
who is on course to be a member of the 27 Club, with her lifestyle and threats from the outside and all that kind of stuff. So that gives Judd that sort of platform to work to for him as a protagonist to work through the book, but
Sure.
also, I can explore that topic in quite a way. And then in Luna, the third book, he is trying to solve an old ancient, well, I say old ancient, a few centuries old cold case. A skeleton has been found in an old house, and he uses past life regressions to try and work out what's happened. So there's that concept as well of
Mhm.
supernatural. And then finally, the fourth book in the Judstone series, it's still going. The Judstone series is going to go on forever and ever, people. But the fourth one, Double Fantasy, that's about him. By this time, he's a private detective because he can play by his own rules. He needs a job. He needs to pay the bills, and he thinks he's got a weekend off to go to Liverpool, which he loves because he's a massive Beatles fan, just like me. But actually, that boozy weekend with his mates goes totally pear-shaped. He gets run out of Liverpool by gangsters, comes across a place called Crank in Merseyside, which has some legends attributed to it, even though it's a very small place. it's like I say, an English countryside, not too far from Liverpool. And then they get involved with witchcraft, with again a satanic cult, and the legends of Crank, which we can talk about if you want. They rise, and that is explored as well. So yeah,
Yeah, so these are, I mean, Crank is a real place, and these are
yeah,
actually the legends that are these are real
yeah,
legends that are in that area.
yeah.
So why don't you tell me about them?
Yeah, sure. So Crank is a real place. So just the name was quite appealing to me.
Sure.
And first of all, I knew it was going to be in Liverpool, and then I knew it was going to get one out, and I knew we'd come across like a place of witchcraft with things on the door, the pentagram, upside down pentagram, and everything on the door, which is quite, well, it's said to be quite rife in the British countryside. Certainly, there's a lot of legends of folklore around paganism and
Sure.
witchcraft, and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, Crank itself, when I started to then look at, okay, where could you flee from Liverpool to and end up in? Crank became, and it's amazing that it's not more known about these legends, but these legends do exist. You find them easily enough on Google, or other search engines. And the first one is the White Rabbit. So very typical of the day, going back to the 17th century, I think it was. Every village in England had an old lady, and they said it was a witch. It
Right.
happened all the time. It's, you know. Um, there used to be a famous thing, the Pendle Witch Trials, and that's actually again looked at in Double Fancy. Actually, I do look at that as well, the Pendle Witch Trials. But anyway, going back to Crank, so they called her this witch, and one guy was very nasty, a farmer called Pullen, who was very nasty indeed, and he got quite obsessed and thought that she had bewitched him. So along with another scallywag in the vicinity called Piers, they decided that they would break in one night, and they were the belief that if you could get blood from a witch, you can break the spell that you're under. You weren't under a spell, I don't think, and I don't think she was a witch, but folklore again.
Right.
Now she had a daughter or granddaughter, I think it was a granddaughter lived with her called Jenny, and Jenny had this white rabbit, and they broke in. As they broke into the house, Jenny heard the breaking. She got spooked. She ran away with her white rabbit. She ended up being exhausted as she was chased and actually died in the chapel from exhaustion,
Oh, wow.
the chapel in Crank. And her white rabbit got beat to death by pulling all peers. Yeah, no, yeah, just nasty people. They just thought
Yeah.
they'd kill the rabbit as well. So the rabbit died. Now, what happened after that was, first of all, Pullen, I think it was, or Piers, one of them, one of the two anyway. First of all, they started to see this image of a white rabbit just appearing everywhere, and they was convinced it was following them, and he died of exhaustion as well, trying to run away from the white rabbit that he said he kept seeing.
Uh-huh.
And then the other guy actually killed himself. He committed suicide because he kept seeing the white rabbit everywhere he was going. This white rabbit was popping up, and now they say that if there's anything, some bad news is coming, probably if you're gonna die, but anything that's quite doomy and gloomy in that village is coming to you soon. You will see this white rabbit appear. So yeah, that's the
Very,
first one.
very creepy.
Yeah. The second one, Crank Caverns. So in this village of Crank, there are literally these caverns which are easily walking distance from the village. But they're very dark, they're very deep, they've been around for centuries and not really explored fully as far as the legends go anyway. So I don't know if people have ever been to the centre as such or the very depths of it. Few legends around the caverns. One that during King Henry VIII's Reformation, Catholic priests used to go and set up their church in there, and they could do their practice their Christianity, Catholicism, their masses. That's the word I'm looking for. They're out of sight. There's nothing too remarkable there. But then another one is that they think that there's a tunnel leads all the way from there to a town actually called St Helens,
Oh,
where secret hangings used to happen. But the most scary one really is that there's these four boys went down there in the 18th century. Only one got away. They were taken by what they cannibalistic small people, a race of small cannibalistic people is how it's described. And the one guy got away, I say, the one boy got away, and as he was going, he literally his ankles grabbed, but he managed to get out of the cavern. Two soldiers went down to investigate. They found skeleton bones of humans, including, I think, the boys.
Ooh.
So there are these tribe of people, whatever you want to call them, are indeed cannibals. And they could feel that these eyes were watching them and everything. They never actually saw them, but they could feel these eyes were watching them, and they could hear whispers, as the boy had said, actually, this different language, another language unknown to people,
Uh,
that they were talking in this kind of Middle Earth place.
okay.
That's the other one, yeah. So
So you got to wonder why the soldiers got out to tell the story.
that's a very good point. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. How did they get out?
exactly.
I don't think they hung around for long. Whether that's something to do with it. So even though they were supposed, and it's described as big birdie soldiers, actually described as big birdie soldiers, but even they got a little bit scared, and I suppose they got out there as quick as they could. But they definitely, the legend goes that they found these human skeletons and skulls and everything down there. Yeah,
Well, I suppose if they had just eaten the three boys, then,
yeah,
maybe they weren't hunting just then.
that could be. Yeah, they're satisfied. Yeah, that could be it. That could be it.
Now,
Yeah, yeah.
you've been there, right?
I have been there. Yeah, yeah. I haven't been all the way in for obvious reasons. But I have certainly been there, and actually the village is beautiful. And there's a pub there called the Red Cat Pub. So you've got a white rabbit and a red cat going. I'll tell you what we found strange visiting. So to get to the caverns, you actually go across a field, and again, this is open to debate what you think this is. But we kept seeing these kind of white carrots, not like a vegetable almost between a parsnip and a carrot. It was neither one or the other. It was something between, but they'd all been kind of half eaten, and
Oh,
there's lots of them everywhere. And we knew about the white rabbit
yeah.
thing, and we just wondered, is this, you hear about offerings to gods and things, and offerings to
Yeah.
appease things, and we wondered was something going on? Was these vegetables being thrown out at night for the white rabbit to eat? And then that appeases, it keeps it at bay, keeps things at bay. I don't know. I'll probably let my imagination run me, but the definite fact, these half-eaten vegetables were everywhere, and they were weird vegetables. But anyway, but going to the cavern, yeah. So I went to the opening, and it's kind of eerie, and it's kind of beautiful at the same time. If that makes sense. It's very still there, very eerie. You think you're miles away from everywhere, but in actual fact, the village is literally 100, 200 yards away. And you can see the chapel. The chapel actually is quite close to the caverns
Oh.
where where Jenny Clapston died. We only went in so far, but it gets dark very, very quick, very, very quickly, and it gets cold and damp very, very quickly. And you could see that maybe people would use it for different things of a night. You could see people gathering overnight. There was a slab laid down, which was a bit unnerving because it
Oh.
was like it did look like a sacrificial slab. This was just outside the entrance, and so yeah, but I don't think we saw another person while we were there. And this was like a Saturday afternoon. Yeah, so I've been there. I wanted to go there because if I'm writing about it, I like to research and visit places as much as I can. Not always possible, but this was possible. I got a really good feel of the place, and I was able to describe it and write it into the book quite accurately of the village, of the caverns, of the houses, even they're up on the hill. It really opened my brain to be able to write quite descriptive of the area and everything. Even the bend that comes around. You come out the village on a bend, and then that you walk up this kind of dirt track and this field, and then you come to the caverns. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
So, it, other than, the very creepy slab that was there,
Yeah.
and kind of, how quickly it got cold and dark, did you have
Yeah.
any other
No,
strange?
I can't say I thought I was going to be eaten. I couldn't feel no one munching at my knees or nothing. on my biting my ankles. I didn't hear I didn't hear another language. I didn't feel I was being watched particularly. But that could also be because I didn't go far enough in. Because I didn't have a torch with me, so that was a bit silly of me not to turn up without a torch, really. I probably could have gone further then. But it got very uneven very quickly as well.
Oh,
The way the cragstones were and everything. So without a torch, it was quite dangerous to start to walk in when it started to get
sure.
dark because
Of
you could
course.
lose your footing so easily. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I have actually never been in a cave.
Wow. Okay.
It's never, I live in an area that's, flat farmland for hours and hours. And I just never got around to it in any of my travels. So
Okay.
I'll have to do that sometime.
Yeah. But
Okay.
take a torch. Take a torch.
I will definitely do that. Of course, you got your phone, so you can always
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
games.
yeah. And we might have tried that, but it might not have just been powerful enough. I don't know. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, we didn't venture that far in. We went far enough, and that was enough.
So do you want to talk about the white feather?
Oh yeah, yeah. So again, I've always I'm always intrigued by folklore and different stories, whether true or whether not. I like to just debate them and keep an open mind as much as possible on everything. Because there's no smoke without fire, right? These stories come from somewhere, and they might get evolve over the years, but something has started it at some point.
Right.
But the white feather one, I mean, the first time I heard about the white feather one, if I'm being honest, was you probably established by now I'm a big John Lennon and Beatles fan. I know that John had said to Julian, who's his first son, if I ever come back to you, it will be through a white feather.
Okay.
And it came that manifest. So I see white feathers, and I think, oh, that's my granddad or something, just a white feather, a little one floats down something, and it can be at an opportune time. You think, oh, okay, thanks. But anyway, or me nan or whoever. But with this John Lennon story and just Julian Lennon story, the weird thing about this was he visited like a Native American tribe. He visited this tribe, and he came, I think it was the chief, came with a big, huge white feather
Hmm.
on the palms, crossed two palms out and brought it to Julian. I don't think there was a language barrier, so they couldn't really talk much, but Julian definitely thought that was John Lennon coming to him to make a sign. And you just think, well, that for John Lennon to say, "I'll come back as a white feather to you," and it's such an extreme way of a white feather.
Right.
That was like that's a little bit thought provoking.
Right.
But then, yeah, so I wrote that, and John, sorry, going back to Julian, he's even set up the White Feather Foundation, which is a charity based on that. He's called it the White Feather Foundation because his belief is so strong, and it obviously that charity does a lot of good. But that concept I brought into Mind Gorilla, where Judd again, I don't want to give too much away, but basically, his first wife has died, and he's looking for, and he feels a lot of guilt over her death. He thinks it's his fault, and he's always looking for signs and everything. And he actually finds a new lady, and they actually visit the site of his first wife where she's buried, because he's kind of, he feels a bit weird, like I've got a new love now. Should I feel guilty for having a new love, even though life goes on and everything? Would she want me to be happy? Blah 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 blah. I still feel guilty about you dying, but I've got this new woman in my life, etc. And a white feather appears, so it gives him the belief, and certainly his girlfriend. He gets more spiritual through the course of the series. Judd does, but certainly his what girlfriend at that time is very sort of more spiritually aware than him, shall we say? And uh, and she's convinced it's a sign, Judd, everything's okay. I don't want to replace your first wife, all that kind of stuff, but we're here together and all. So the white feather is seen as a way to connect and say things and say everything's all right, yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely heard before that a white feather means that, some sort of relative or friend that is in
Yeah.
spirit is like looking out for you and protecting you. I know there's like a whole big belief system around what all the different like if you find a black feather or if you
Yeah,
find an iridescent blue feather, they all mean something different. Some
yeah,
mean, angels are coming to you or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, I've definitely heard the white one is for relatives
yeah.
passed.
Another one we have here, I don't know if you've got that in the States, is sort of pennies appear on a path
Yeah.
when someone's died. Again, that's them, especially if someone's very recently moved on. But these pennies will show as a sign. That's another one, similar to the white feather thing, yeah. So,
Yeah, and I've also heard people who, if the person was into something very specific, like they collected like statuettes of cardinals, right? Then,
right, okay.
you start to see cardinals everywhere, whether it's, something you go to a restaurant and there's a image of a cardinal, or you see a cardinal, or you see a red feather, whatever it is.
Yeah,
And if it's like really specific like that, that
yeah.
symbolism comes into play, that's how they use it.
Okay.
And I've heard stories about, specifically like it's going to be a dime if it's from my father, it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so yeah, there's a
Robins as well. Robin redbreast birds.
mhm.
That's another one that's meant to be. They appear as souls of people who have gone. Just to they're just popping by to say hello. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the like most common birds like where I live is the robin redbreast. So I see them
Oh wow.
all the time. So yeah. Okay, so can you let the listeners know how people can find your books?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to my website, which is www.martintracy.co.uk. I should really get a .com as well, but I've got .co.uk. And it's one word, Martin Tracy, which is Martintracey. You should find me anyway if you search. So all my books are on there, and news coming. If you want to sign up to my newsletter, we can arrange that. I'll give you my email address. I don't mind. You can tell I'm a Beatles fan again. Martin Paperback Writer at yahoo.co.uk. So drop me a line. Drop me a line anyway. But if you want to join my newsletter, drop me a line. I'm always happy to chat with people
Well,
and be
I want
listening.
to join your newsletter. So, and you've already
Oh, fantastic.
yeah,
Right, I'll make that a thing then.
good.
Amazon, of course, is where primarily where you'll find my book sold. And the links are from my website to Amazon anyway. But I've got obviously my author Amazon page in doc or Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, and all around the world. I'm even selling books in Japan, which
Nice.
always makes me think how. But thank you, Japanese audience. And then yeah, I'm on all the socials as well. So yeah, you can find me on any social you name pretty much. So you can
Have you
find me on, and then anyway, the links again are on my website to
have,
them as well.
have you jumped over to Blue Sky yet?
I have, yeah. I haven't engaged with it too much.
I'll have to track you down.
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky and I'm on Threads. You got Threads, don't you?
I've got
Yeah, which
Threads,
is
yeah. That's one I don't use very much.
no, no. It's just it's one of them, and you think, well, I'll go on it because it's another platform where I could do something, and it does link. It is a thread, links to your Facebook and your Instagram, doesn't it? So
Right. Yeah,
so
I
you post once, you post once,
everywhere, yeah.
and you post 3 times. So
Yeah, I've been primarily focused on Blue Sky. I just really like the vibe there. Although I will say, if you're looking for me, you have to look for Folkloring Podcast because
yeah,
in the meantime, since I've had my account, somebody else set up an account that is just folkloring, and that is not me.
okay.
It's not me, and it's not in English. So
Yeah, okay, I'll find it. I'll try and find you. Please find me. I think
yeah.
I'm just Martin Tracy, author. That is one thing I've found with Blue Sky. It's difficult to search people
Mhm.
just by name because you have this kind of email address set up, don't you? Martin.Tracy Blue Sky at whatever. And I found that with some people, unless you put that in directly, you can't find them. Like where you can just put a name and you'd usually get about 8 to 10 different possibilities.
Right, right,
Sometimes it comes back to zero,
right.
but you know the person's on there because they've told you. So you just don't. So yeah, there is that.
Yep. Yeah, and I also find that because they don't have the same kinds of algorithms, that
Right.
you just get what's most recently posted. So,
Okay.
like I dip in there very often for just a couple of minutes to see. Otherwise, you miss a lot of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like to share? Final thoughts to leave with the listeners?
Final thoughts, I guess, a little bit about what's coming in my non-fiction world. There's two biographies coming. One about Robin George, who is a guy who sadly passed away in April, but he had worked with Phil Lynott, Robert Plant,
Hmm.
a whole heap of artists, and then Fuzzbox, who are an 80s girl band. So I'm working on both authorised biographies. So they're coming, but there is two Judge Stone novels I've actually started. Two
Ooh.
in so books 5 and 6 will be coming at some point, folks. But I guess all I want to just leave with the listeners is thank you for listening. Keep safe, but keep an open mind, I think, that there's all keep an open mind to things. Don't have a closed mind because I think that's not good for anyone. So,
Yep.
but thanks for listening, everyone.
Well,
And thank you to Tracy for having me.
thanks for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
As always, thanks for listening to Folkloring. If you liked what you heard, please consider leaving a rating and review, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Facebook or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent, or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.